Hello there, and welcome to this Maya tutorial series. In this series, we will try and cover the basics of Autodesk Maya and maybe more advanced stuff along the way. But first, let me just briefly tell you about myself. I'm currently studying my third year at uni, and this will be my fifth year using 3D software. And of course, I expanded my knowledge into several other softwares that do a number of things, like texturing, game engines, VFX, photo editing, and so on. For my first few videos, I will go over the absolute basics from navigation, your toolbars, planning projects to help you understand the foundations of becoming a 3D artist. I hope you find these videos enjoyable, interesting, and, well, not boring. Leave a comment below for any questions, subscribe to my channel, it would actually help me a lot. And finally, hit the like button, or don't. I won't try and find you. That's not my intention at all. Alright guys, enjoy. So this is Autodesk Maya 2018. The reason I use this is mainly just because I feel more comfortable with it as opposed to the other ones that I've used previously. If any older users out there like myself have used this before, you realize it looks a little bit different, just basically a reskin. Everything's nicely cleaned up, more minimalist, if you would say. And yeah, some things have been like thrown aside and made into like more whiter icons, taking out more of the details so they're easier to read, including the UV and whatnot. But anyway, this is the view that you will be mostly familiar with when you launch up Maya. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you around each one of the panels, and more likely the ones that you will be using throughout your course of these tutorial videos. So let's get started. This here is the main view, and obviously as you can see we have these little digits here. Now what I do is this is only my setup because this is usually how I like it. These show me my verts, my edges, faces, tries, UVs and whatnot. Excuse me. And what I'm going to do is, as I go through each of these, I am going to place a shape and modify it as we go through, so it gives you a better understanding of how each tool or toolbar, as you would say, or each panel would affect said shape. So, to start with first, on the left, we have our quick tools, I would like to call them. So you have your select, your lasso tool, your paint selection tool. Actually, let's get ourselves a shape in here from our main toolbar at the top. So I'm going to use the standard polygon cube, and it just appears right there after a click, and we can zoom in on that with the scroll of the mouse wheel, and we have it here. Just to hold you there, I did forget to mention about the different controls to rotate, zoom, and pan around your object. In this little interruption, I have placed each mouse control or key binding plus mouse control that would help you around your object. So quickly take note of these, or just memorize them, I don't know how you guys do it, and continue to play the video. Enjoy. I think it's 1-to-1 on each scale, and I think my scale is set to meters. I will have to check that for you, but Maya, like every other 3D editing software, has their own measurement scale. I would check these if I was to hand this over to an engine, because each engine has their own metrics such as meters, feet, and so on and so forth, like Unity and Unreal and Marmoset, and even what was the one that Amazon made? Damn, I really need to learn again. Anyway, we will continue. So I'll take you through each of these now. So as we said, At the side we have our quick toolboxes, and some of these are actually key binded. So we have the move, which is W, the rotate, which is E, the scale, which is R, and it rests nicely on your fingers. Especially if you're a WASD player, sometimes you can like just quickly move over to the side and just start doing your stuff there. There's another hidden one, which is the other transform tool, and I will get to that later. But yeah, if I click on my square, I will be immediately introduced to these three axes. As of course in 3D space, you are aware of the X, Y, and Z values, as you can see on the bottom left corner of the viewport here. So that means red is X, Z is blue, and Y is green. And usually Z is known as your front side. It's not X, because if you were facing a cube from the front, like in a 2D game, X is left and right, and if I was to face this on the side, blue is forward and backwards. Actually, it might be better if I shown it this way. Yeah, as we can see yet again down here, Z is facing downwards, but in perspective, it is facing the front. So yeah, we have that, and going onwards from that, we have our rotate tool, which shows exactly the same thing, but only this time each axis is represented as a ring on a gyrosphere. I think that's a nice word for it. The next one would be the scale, which is R. I'm going to press that, and it's introduced similarly to that of the move tool, which is X, Y, and Z. Each one of these has a middle point, which controls the axis which it splits down the middle with. So for example, we have X and Y. We are going to move this on the X and Y axes. It doesn't move forward or backwards. Same goes to the X and Z. The X and Z. It goes forward and sideways, but not up. And then forward and upwards goes that way. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory when you get used to it. But you will have to take your time with that, just to make sure you get it right. Anyway, so that's the quick sides. These bottom here are the different viewports you can go into. So you can have a panel layout. We can have the main layout, which is here. We can also have quad view when you press space. These will show you all the different types of orthographic cameras, so the top, the front, and the side cameras, including the perspective camera, which we will mostly be using. This only helps you to keep track of certain perspectives and making sure that every side, face, and vert is exactly where you want it to be. If you ever to find yourself in a tricky situation, say for example, if you're unsure about something being, let's use an example. If there was a vert here, let me actually try this. I'm just going to use a quick example. Yeah. So say we have this weird ball shaped thing here. Say we have our verts, the top and the bottom one. Say if I move this vert out of side, I don't know if this is going to be lined up with the bottom one. Even if I did this, I'd be like, oh, okay, I can try as much as I can to get in the middle, and yeah, that would be okay. But if you had to make sure that was fine, you could, go on the quad view, go to your top perspective, and make sure it lines up by using a wireframe. As we can tell, this isn't lined up. So we would therefore bring it back together, and now that should be exactly how we left it, as it originally spawned. Anyway, I am going to put this back to a square and we can move on. On the next panel alongside, we have the outliner, and now I'm basically going to tell you this includes everything you will put into your scene, including your different cameras, perspective, top, front, and side, any mesh that you may have, including transforming data. I will get to that later. and your default sets, such as your lighting and your object sets. I don't look into this personally, I just leave it as it is. And the reason why I assume they're called P cube is polycube. It's pretty straightforward sense. So I've covered the left and the outliner, and I have done the viewport. The next one would be these here. So this would be your attributes editor and your channel editor. These are all shown in these little icons above on the top right, just underneath the workspace setout. Each one of these are dedicated to the object that you are selecting or working with. So, for example, in your attribute editor, which I'm assuming this is, no, sorry, your channel box. Your channel box comprises of the translations, the rotations, the scales, and the visibility, including any extra inputs such as width, height, depth, subdivision, width, height, and depth. So what it means by that is 4, 6, 2. And that's how your item is affected through each of these. These are pretty self-explanatory, as the width will change the physical forms of it overall, if you get my meaning, through this visual representation here. The next one, if you press Control A, which is the key binding, or if you click on your attribute editor, this is where things get quite technical. It shows you the inner workings of this polycube, every single detail that you can do. There's a lot more than just a cube. There's obviously its transform attributes, its pivot data, display, how it shows itself, limiting information, and node behavior. Anyway, I digress. It also stores all of the data that you do to this cube later on, and we will see that later on in this video. Moving on, we have the modeling toolkit, and this is what I usually use. I will get into this later on because this is very, very in-depth, and I'm looking forward to getting into this. Character controls, this is when you do animation or rigging. Like I said, I will get into this later if I can. And then your tool settings, which only relates to the tool that you are currently using, such as move, your rotate, and scale, including anything else that we need to as well. So, the last one that I will touch upon is, and actually I might touch on a few later on, but first I want to get this important one out of the way first. The main toolbar, which is above the viewport, just above here, it holds every single tool that you could possibly need within Maya to create your project. The one that I usually use is the poly modeling to get started with. There's different types of modeling out there, so you have your curves and surfaces, you can make specific shapes. This could be good with, let's say if you're making a jet ski with all the curves and rims. It's very specific, very mathematical at times, and you need a lot of curves. And sometimes poly modeling just doesn't cut that at times. You might need to, not cheat your way, but know how these work to get a head start on it. I will get into these later, but usually these will be represented like these. I don't know much about my animation to say, but I do know that sometimes these can be used as rigging controllers, but I will research into that later, because I am still a uni student after all, and I specialise in environments and hard modelling, not animation, shamefully. Got poly modeling, I always use these. I will get into these very later as I go into my next video. Sculpting, pretty self-explanatory. Think of wax sculpting, when you just get an object and then you can just like mess about with it. It's a bit like ZBrush if you've ever heard of it, but a little bit more, very simple, but very buggy, if you ask my opinion. I'd rather get ZBrush or Blender. Rigging, as I'm sure you're aware, that is for rigging up a character to make sure it gets its skeletons and forms in prep for animation. As we move on, that is more animation right here. I will get into that later. Rendering how the scene is viewed, such as lighting, shadows, different materials like blends, anthroposcopic lamberts, fongs and fong-ease, ramps, and so forth. Effects, I have no idea about these. Bifrost, these are used for your particle effects such as aeroflames, liquids, and so on. Mash, the only thing I can get from this is only these two polygon types. So if you type in a word, it'll show up as a 3D physical object, and an SVG. These will be a little bit more advanced later on as we go on, but they are there if you want to give them a try. Motion graphics, the only thing I just recently figured this one out, but I usually do my own motion graphics at another software in Adobe, so I don't tend to touch on this. XGen is for hairs and other grooming things. You might have grass that you might want to make, so we will touch on that very later on in the future. Arnold and Turtle are mainly just rendering engine tools, so you can add certain materials that will get rendered a certain way. So yeah, that is mainly the most part of your navigation that we will have to cover for now. The thing I was going to touch upon is this is your timeline. It's pretty self-explanatory. It shows, in this one it shows time, but if I do my frames, yeah. Basically the timeline sets itself on average at about 200 frames when you start up. So your 200 frames will be here, if I just type that in. And this will pick out a frame within that range that we'd want to use. So if I use 100, it only picks out half of the range that I have fully used. And the play, the stop, and the frame rate, etc, etc. I will come back to these in the next video and show you guys how some of these can work. I think mainly for now we will focus more on the actual modeling side of it, so we'll be going through each one of these tools if we can. So yeah, I'd say try not to worry about it. It's plenty of information to soak in, but you can track back the video and make sure you haven't missed anything out. I am quite nervous about doing these videos, but I am very optimistic that it will work out. I have, like I say, plenty of years in 3D modeling software and alternative software, so I have good confidence. I will still do my research alongside and edit them in the captions within the video. But yeah, this is going to be an adventure and one I am very happy to share with everyone else. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.